continue this sermon series on redemption from the Old Testament book of Ruth, the 4th chapter, verses 13 to 17. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life, and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. The women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David. This is God's word, and it is true. Let all who believe say amen.
Truly, it's not a sermon unless it is clothed in a legal binder. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you for the story of Ruth, and I pray, Lord, now that you use me as a vessel to share the good news of this story to your people gathered in this place. And I'll give you all the thanks and praise in Jesus' name. Amen. So today, as our redemption series continues, we are in the book of Ruth, as Larry stated. And today we find 2 women, and their names are Naomi and Ruth. But we find them in just a very hopeless, sure death situation. What we hear on the scripture was the end of the story. But what in the world happened that created such a predicament for them? Their predicament they found themselves in, there was no way out. They could not save themselves, and there was absolutely no hope. So in order to better understand this story, we have to begin with chapter 1 of Ruth. The opening verses introduce us to a man named Elimelech. Couldn't be called Bob or Ralph, no, Elimelech. And we are introduced to his 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Naomi is just kind of an afterthought. But after introducing these 3 males, we think, well, the story is going to be all about the men, which that was what the culture mostly was. But within 5 short verses, death shows up and takes all 3 men out of the picture, leaving Naomi and her 2 daughter-in-laws, Ruth and Orpah, behind. This might not seem like a big deal, but in a male-centered culture that ascribed value to women based on their relationships to men, they're husbandless, they're sonless, these women held no interest to anyone. And in many minds, especially in their own minds, the story was over. They had no hope. They had no way out. They could not save themselves. It's a hopeless situation. But Naomi's sufferings didn't begin in Moab, but it started 10 years earlier, back in Bethlehem with a famine. Now, we think of a famine, and we just can't even fathom the famine. Okay? We just can't figure that out because we're so prosperous. But back in the ancient world, that meant everything. When a famine hit, people had to move. So Naomi and her family relocated. And although the relocation of Elimelech's family was supposed to be short-term, it ended up being 10 long years. Within those 10 years, there were 3 strikes that hit this family. Strike number 1 came when Naomi lost her husband. It was a milestone she never meant to cross. And the loss of a spouse is hard enough to deal with, especially if you're in a foreign land. But then came strike 2. Naomi and her sons had married Mahlon, Orpah, and Ruth, but they were barren. And in a culture that was based on women bearing children and bearing male children, this double barrenness brought to the women personally their inability to conceive was a catastrophe for the family, because the birth of at least one male was needed to carry on the name. And folks, if this wasn't heartache enough, strike 3 hits, and both sons died. So, in Naomi's mind, there's really only one thing to do. She voices it in chapter 1, verse 6 and 7. When she heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, Naomi and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she'd been living for 10 years, and she set out on the road that would take her back to Judah. Somewhere along the way, and I just kind of have to think that Naomi thought that this was going to happen before she even left. Somewhere along the way, Naomi stops in her tracks, and she instructs Orpah and Ruth to go back to Moab. She tells them that Yahweh will reward them for kindness to her and to her sons by blessing them with rest in the homes of new husbands. She wants them to go back. Well, Orpah takes her up on her offer, and Orpah returns. But she can't get Ruth to go. She tells and asks her and begs her twice. And then finally, Ruth says this to her. Naomi, where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, your God will be my God, and where you die, I will die, and there I'll be buried. Ruth's response is just a powerful reminder that the most important thing in all of life, the purpose for which we were all created, is to know God and to walk through life as his or her child, no matter what it costs us. And sometimes it costs us a lot. Sometimes we find ourselves standing at ground zero. Sometimes we find ourselves hurting and broken. Sometimes we find ourselves with absolutely no place to go. We have no way out, and we have no hope. This is where Ruth and Naomi found themselves. So in the middle of the road, after Naomi claims her allegiance to Ruth, both women turn their face towards Bethlehem and begin their journey. Now you have to understand that in the ancient world, without a father, without a husband, son, or any male relative to speak of, a woman had no voice. A woman had no legal rights and no recourse against injustice. This is how Naomi and Ruth arrive in Bethlehem. They have several strikes against them. They're female, they're in a foreign land, they're barren, and they're widowed. All reason to consider them undesirable. Yet, when there is no way out, God provided a way. God doesn't exile them to the margins of the story. He features them both in that central story of redemption. God doesn't retire the disconnected women from active duty. He recruits them to a leading role in the unfolding of his promises. So what happens? Well, once in Bethlehem, guess what? They're hungry. And they're faced with hunger forcing Ruth into the workplace, where she became a common field laborer. Ruth found herself gleaning in a field who belonged to a man named Boaz from the clan of, you guessed it, Elimelech. So following Mosaic law, Boaz told his harvesters to leave the corners and the edges of the field uncut when they harvested, and he further instructed them to only comb once over the field, leaving the uncut grain behind, and miss scraps for the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the foreigner. This process of gathering these missed leftover scraps was called gleaning. Now, depending on conditions in the field and the attitudes of the people working, Ruth could easily labor all day long and only bring enough for one meal. However, Boaz, the owner of the field, notices Ruth and asks about her and says, "Hey, whose young woman is this And the foreman shares the information concerning Ruth and repeated to Boaz this. Boaz was so moved by what he had heard about Naomi and Ruth that he told Ruth this. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you come to take refuge. The quantity of raw grain that an average gleaner brought home from a day's work's anyone's guess, hopefully enough to feed the family. But that particular day, as the Lord provided the way, Ruth brings home an ephah of barley. Scholars estimate Ruth brought home 29 pounds of grain. To put Ruth's gleanings in perspective, old Babylonian records show that a take-home pay of an average gleaner was maybe 1 pound. When Ruth arrived home that day with her bounty, the amount of barley prompted a question from Naomi. Where in the world did you glean today, and where did you work? And Ruth responded, the name of the man I worked with today was Boaz. The Lord bless him, said Naomi. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. And then she added this. The man is our close relative. He's one of our kinsman redeemers. In every Israelite family, there were two issues that were paramount. The survival of the family name and keeping family land in family hands. The Elimelech family ran into trouble on both of these accounts. Famine drove them off their land, and debts of Elimelech and his 2 sons threatened the family with extinction. But Mosaic law, however, carried provisions to save the dying family and to protect their ownership of the land. This kinsman redeemer law focused on the land and encompassed a wide range of relatives. When a man fell into hard times and was forced to sell his land, his nearest relative or kinsman redeemer was called to step in and purchase the land to keep his relative's property from coming under the ownership of someone outside their tribe. With the knowledge of Boaz being a kinsman redeemer, Naomi goes into overdrive in figuring out how to get Ruth and Boaz together. Naomi suggests to Ruth that she go to Boaz according to the culture of that day and offer to become his wife, and to challenge him to become their kinsman redeemer. Naomi gives Ruth explicit instructions on how to do this, and how to approach Boaz, and what to say. And her actions are met with approval, evidenced by his reply, found in chapter 3, verse 10 through 13. May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You've not gone after a younger man, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid, for I will do for you all that you ask. For all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. But there's a little problem. Although I am a near kinsman redeemer, there is another kinsman more closely related than I. Boaz was a kinsman redeemer, yes, but just when everything's going better than anyone had imagined, when you think the story is about to end, Boaz shares the news with Ruth. He's not the nearest relative. There's one who is nearer and has the first responsibility to take on the kinsman redeemer role. So, what happens? Boaz goes to the city gates and he sits there. The city gates were where business transactions were frequently made, and it was a place where judges and city officials could be found. Not long after Boaz arrived, he saw a man he was seeking, and he called out to him. Trouble is, the Bible doesn't give us a name, so we're going to call him No Name. Man's not given a name. Boaz stated his case to Mr. No Name. Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. And I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me that I may know. For there is no one but you to redeem it. and I'm next after you. And would you believe it? Mr. No Name said, I'll do it. I will redeem it. But then came the kicker. Boaz explained, on the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through the inheritance. In effect, Boaz is saying, oh, gee, by the way, this is a package deal. If someone's going to exercise the right of kinsman redeemer towards the deceased Elimelech, he had to fulfill the duty in regard to both the property and the posterity. He explains that he must marry Ruth in order to raise up a child for the dead man, a child who will inherit the land when he grows up. This is a package deal, folks. When it was a matter of property, it was easy to decide on. But if he has to take Ruth as a wife, that's a whole different ballgame. At this point, Mr. No Name says, nope, I don't want to do this. You can become the kinsman redeemer. The people who were gathered at the city gate erupted in celebration as Boaz grasps his kinsman's sandal for culture of that day and announces his determination to fulfill his obligations. And the people stated, we are the witnesses. In one single little verse, the long-anticipated wedding between Boaz and Ruth takes place behind the scenes, and we are informed that Yahweh intervenes to reverse Ruth's barrenness. Part of the blessing pronounced on Ruth and Boaz was that of children. And if you'll remember at the beginning of the story, in those 10 years Ruth was married to Mahlon, she was not able to bear a child. But through the Lord's intervention, she conceived and bore a son for Boaz. God provided the way when there seemed to be no way in sight. According to chapter 4, verse 15, the blessing continues. And may he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is better to you than 7 sons, has borne you. Our story concludes with this one final snapshot of Naomi sitting with her newborn Obed in her arms, as the women of the village gather around to celebrate this birth and Naomi's redeemed future. Because you see, Obed creates for Naomi a brand new opening into the future and a vital new kingdom assignment. Obed becomes the beneficiary of all that these two women have gained from what they suffered and sacrificed. He will carry their past with him into the future. You see, during all of this, as Naomi is cradling this baby, she is completely unaware that the whole world is counting on this baby that she cradles in her arms for the fulfillment of God's promises to redeem his people and to put to right this fallen world. Ruth and Boaz were part of a purpose much bigger than both of them. And in the end, through tragedy, through sacrifice, it's God that provides a way to secure the royal line of Christ. That last verse of the book of Ruth provides the genealogy of David. It states, Obed the father of Jesse, Jesse the father of David. But Obed will not be the last boy born in Bethlehem to hold such a strategic place in the world's history. There was one coming who would offer redemption to all that would place their trust in him. There was one coming that would offer to be the ultimate kinsman redeemer for all. There was one coming that would provide the way, the truth, and the life. You see, in the midst of the darkness, when there is no hope, when there is no way out, when we realize that we simply cannot save ourselves, God provides the way. And along the way, God chooses to use those who seem broken, desperate, and completely unqualified according to human standards to accomplish God's purposes in this world. And here's the good news. There is one coming back to redeem creation. And to that end, we say in one accord, "Come, Lord Jesus." Let's